Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the Rudy-Randle meltdown. What happened in Toronto on Thursday night? We'll break down one of the Wolves. I don't know. There's a lot of these worst losses of the season to date. We'll break it down here next. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by Robinhood. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are available now for only $5 per month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. A not so happy Friday in Timberwolves land. We'll talk about the latest bad loss of the season against the Raptors on Thursday night and, try and parse the real from the panic, I guess we'll say, when it comes to the fourth quarter, another fourth quarter meltdown. This one feels a bit more alarming because of how it happened and the players that involved and, when things began to spiral. And I think you know what I'm talking about. So I want to give my 2 cents on that, kind of try and feel our way through this thing because, I'll get into it here in a second. And then I want to talk obviously about the game itself, what happened to the Wolves, what went well, what didn't. I mean, Toronto did a great job of making this game just really kind of a slog through the mud is what this felt like. And the Wolves didn't respond they did for portions of the game, but it did not end favorably for Minnesota. So we'll do all that on the show here today. We'll do studs and duds toward the end. So a lot to get to. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And also a reminder about the Locked On Wolves newsletter. You can sign up on LockedOnDaily.com to get your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Again, sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Okay. So let's start with the play everybody's talking about. If you're a regular listener to the show, you know I pride myself on not being hot takey. And, it's maybe not the most popular approach when it comes to podcasting or blogging or anything on the internet that requires clicks or views. But I think it's gross to be hot takey. And I'm pretty pragmatic when it comes to stuff. So I want to try and be level-headed here about both the Rudy-Randle play and the game overall and what this means. And sometimes I'm pragmatic to a fault, and maybe there is some overreaction required at times. I'm not quite there yet. So let's talk about the play. If you missed it, what happened in this game was the Timberwolves and Raptors were basically back and forth. Minnesota had actually built a slight lead in the fourth quarter. I think they were up by 5, I think was the most they were up by in the fourth quarter. I think that's true. Yeah, by 5 points. Things had, by the way, already started to devolve a bit offensively for Minnesota. Jaden McDaniels went on a 7-0 run himself, or 7. I guess the Raptors kept scoring too. It was a 7-4 run, but he had scored 7 straight points for Minnesota. And suddenly it was okay, anytime you have Jaden McDaniels heat checks, that ball movement, the flow of the offense is not where it needs to be. And that's kind of what we had here. We had a Jaden McDaniels heat check, 3-pointer. And then, the Raptors make a bucket on the other end. It's a tie game. Anthony Edwards takes a bit of an ill-advised shot. McDaniels gets the offensive rebound, kicks it out to Julius Randle. And Rudy Gobert has Scotty Barnes sealed under the basket. Rudy's standing, his head's basically under the rim. And not basically, it is. And Barnes is sealed under the backboard. Gobert's calling for the ball. Randle pounds the air out of the ball, refuses to give him the ball. Rudy refuses to get out of the paint, kind of slowly starts to wander out of the paint as Scotty Barnes is looking at the official and yelling for 3 seconds. They eventually give the 3-second call. And of course, TV cameras catch Ant, I would say, yelling at Rudy, asking him what he was doing, shaking his head. Overall team body language, not great. And then what happens immediately after? Rudy Gobert gets a silly foul on the other end, just for no reason, just kind of creating some extra contact. Barnes gets a couple of free throws, and things devolve from there. DiVincenzo misses a jumper. Gobert turns the ball over. DiVincenzo turns the ball over the next possession. Gobert makes one of two free throws, and then McDaniels misses a dunk that would have cut it to a 5-point game with 2.5 minutes left. And then it gets back to 9. Wolves call timeout. The game's basically over at that point. The Rudy-Randle play, a quick survey of Twitter tells me that I'm going to say roughly 3/4 of people are blaming Rudy alone for this disappointing display of both basketball, like just plain basketball, and also I would say maturity, certainly teamwork, sportsmanship, whatever you want to call it. Because first of all, Rudy had every right to call for the basketball in that situation. Does the fact that Rudy is always calling for the basketball, even when he shouldn't be, does that impact this a little? I'm sure it did from Randall's perspective. Yes, it's a little bit like the boy who cried wolf. Rudy will think he has an opportunity to score and needs the ball more often than he should. But in this situation, when you have Scotty Barnes sealed under the rim, it's not it's not just a low block post up. It's not like the Wolves run that for Rudy ever. This was essentially just, it's like rim running in transition and sealing a small under the basket. That's what this was, even though it was off an offensive rebound. So give the man the ball. For Randle to stare down Rudy and not give him the ball, it'd be one thing if Randle immediately rose and shot a 3 because, hey, I've got a mismatch too, or whatever. I've got, off this offensive rebound, I can let it fly. That would have been fine. Maybe wouldn't have been as good as throwing the ball to Rudy with the mismatch, but it would have been fine. But to stare him down and not pass him the ball, that to me is the first mistake of this whole thing. And I actually think the biggest one. Well, no, let me take that back. From a basketball standpoint, that's the biggest mistake. From a body language, team maturity standpoint, the Rudy Gobert behaving the way he did, intentionally, essentially getting a 3-second call, shrugging it off, and then committing a silly foul on the other end, that's essentially a 4 to 5 point swing because the Wolves get the turnover and then he commits the foul that leads to 2 more Raptors points on the other end. So Randall's to blame to start, and then Rudy makes it even worse. And both guys are at fault. And both guys, they're supposed to be 2 of the best 3 players on this team. They're both multiple-time All-Stars. They've both been to the playoffs. The track records speak for themselves. And they cannot act this way. Or going even further back, Randle can't make that silly of a basketball play to not recognize how bad that mismatch is or how advantageous that mismatch is for Minnesota to throw the ball down to Rudy. And then for Rudy to behave like an actual, not even a middle schooler. Like that was like an elementary school tantrum. It really was. So I fault them both. And honestly, the not throwing the ball to Rudy's, it's almost as bad. It really is. And I know Rudy doesn't have the greatest hands, but he had a very clear mismatch. And either he was going to catch the basket for a dunk, or Scotty Barnes was going to foul Rudy trying to get around him to, wrap around his body to try and knock the ball away or whatever, or he would foul him intentionally. Like, at the very least, that's free throws for Minnesota. It's not going to be a turnover in that situation. He had him the position was that good for Rudy. And then I also think, I'm not like a big, he should be benched for that sort of a guy, but I think this is a situation where Chris Finch's laissez-faire approach to many things, which I think is very effective at the NBA level in a lot of ways. I think it hurts here. Now, whatever they did in the wake of the Kyle Anderson, Rudy Gobert spat, 18 months ago, game 82 of the 22-23 season against New Orleans, the way they handled that, ultimately suspending Rudy for the play-in game, that clearly worked out. Those guys played together well last year. The team was good. The chemistry, the camaraderie was there. So maybe this also gets smoothed over. And Chris Finch has a history with Julius Randle more than he did with Kyle Anderson, and now has coached Rudy for a longer period of time. So perhaps in the long run, the way Finch handled it is correct. And I'm willing to admit that that's true. In the moment, it did feel like the rare situation where an NBA coach should have been, or easily could have been, like, hey, Rudy, you got to take a seat, man. That's not okay. We're going to put a guy out there that's going to play hard and not intentionally get a 3-second call. And then the conversation with Randle later of, hey, man, you got to throw the ball down when he's got that kind of a mismatch and got somebody in that type of a way underneath the basket. I think Chris Finch takes far too much heat. He's a really, really good coach. And I think his hands-off approach in a lot of ways is very positive. It may hurt in this sort of a situation because now there's a question of, like, who's in charge here? If the voice of Ant isn't getting Rudy and Randle to like each other and get in line, and the two veterans in Rudy and Randle, or the two older veterans, can't get themselves in line and figure this thing out, what are we doing? And that's a fair question to ask. I want to talk a bit more about the actual basketball in this game too. And if this is a skies falling moment, yet, we've said this too many times over the first month plus of the season, but we'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Chime. We've all hit a point where we've realized it's time to make serious money moves. Take control of your finances by using a Chime checking account with features like no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Learn more at chime.com/NBA. I'm sure you or somebody you know has overdrafted before, and it's no fun to deal with. But guess what? With Chime, if you overdraft, you could overdraft up to $200 with no fees. Chime helps you make progress with fee-free overdraft. Your next deposit can be applied to your balance. You can get spotted on debit card purchases and cash withdrawals, plus no monthly fees or maintenance fees. And there's over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. It's really simple. Just set up your direct deposit in your Chime account. After a qualifying direct deposit of $200 or more, Chime will notify you to enroll in Spot Me. With an activated debit card, Chime will spot you up to $200 when you exceed your balance. Your next direct deposit would be then applied to your negative balance. Chime never charges fees or interest for using Spot Me. Make your fall finances a little greener by working toward your financial goals with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/NBA. That's chime.com/NBA. Chime feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A. Members FDIC. Spot Me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Boosts are available to eligible Chime members enrolled in Spot Me and are subject to monthly limits. Terms and conditions apply. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is also brought to us by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time now has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time is the absolute best place to find any sort of live event tickets. It's, of course, sports. Great time of year for sports right now. College football and NFL, college basketball and NBA, NHL, you name it, it's happening right now, except for baseball. Also concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Plus, when you find your tickets, you can toggle on the all-in pricing feature to allow you to see your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you think you find a better price somewhere else. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's talk a bit more about what happened in this Raptors game. So, from the beginning, this thing was a slop fest, as I like to call these sorts of games. And credit to the Raptors. Well, first of all, Scottie Barnes played. And I said wrongly on Thursday's show, I didn't think he was going to play. He'd been out like 3 weeks. I thought he was probably still out. There hadn't been a whole lot of reporting on it. But he played, which was a big deal. And he played well. But the Raptors are a team that has a lot more talent than their record indicates. And part of that's the Scottie Barnes injury. Part of that's other injuries as well. Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk and guys that have been out. The Raptors should be a better team than they've been so far this year. And again, credit to them. They play hard. They share the ball. They've got, they're not a good 3-point shooting team, but they do some other stuff well. They rebound the ball okay. And I think their activity level just makes things difficult on their opponents. And that was very clear in this game. The Wolves weren't ready for it early. And, well, ultimately, the first quarter was like the Wolves only lost the first quarter by 5. They were down 1 at halftime. There were some decent stretches in there. It was, and a lot of it was Toronto was shooting themselves in the foot, and that was keeping Minnesota in the game. Frankly, the Wolves were doing a pretty good job of jumping passing lanes. Nikhil Alexander-Walker poked the ball away from Grady Dick what felt like 4 times. Clearly the Wolves had planned, hey, this team wants to turn the ball over. Let's jump some passing lanes and get out in transition and get some easy buckets. And they did. So that was a good thing to see. We also saw some solid rotation minutes from Dillingham in the first half. He actually played okay in the second half too, until he, of course, sprained his ankle right when he gets an opportunity and plays well. In the first half, I actually thought Dillingham in limited minutes was one of the better players on the floor for Minnesota. Ant was in foul trouble early. I think he had 5 points at halftime, had 3 fouls, had to come out toward the end of the second quarter. I thought Naz struggled in the first half. Offensively, Nikhil had a really rough first half. The Wolves missed a bunch of buckets in the paint and turned it over a ton themselves too. Finally in the second quarter, the Raptors shot the ball well in the first quarter. The Wolves got to the line a ton, which again is something the Raptors turned it over a ton and they foul a ton too. Wolves got a ton of free throws in the first quarter. And that's what kept them in the game is the Raptors turnovers and the Wolves shooting free throws. The Raptors themselves shot the ball well from the field in the first quarter to also kind of keep things close, or to keep them ahead, I should say. The Wolves kept it close with the Raptors turnovers and fouls. And then in the second quarter, the offense looked a little bit better for the Wolves until all of a sudden they started turning it over like crazy. The Raptors weren't shooting the ball much better. The second quarter was just kind of gross overall. And ultimately at halftime, it was a 1-point Toronto lead. And the note I kept making during this game was Toronto's just playing hard all the time, no matter who's on the floor, no matter who's got the ball. Toronto plays hard, crashing the glass, cutting to the basket, backdoor cuts, jumping passing lanes, all the above, gambling for steals. They're just all over the place. The Wolves missed layups early in the game. It really hurt them. And then also, they missed a lot of jumpers short. Ant airballed a couple in a row at one point. Jaden had some short shots. They had a bunch. The Wolves just kept missing short, which seemed weird to me, given that they had, 3 days of rest coming into this game. And I don't know if it was just because they had 3 days. It doesn't make sense to me, but they were short a lot early in the game. It took them a while for them to really catch a rhythm in terms of their jump shots. The other problem early was points in the paint. And actually, this is a problem for the game, period. I think Toronto had, in the first quarter, if I'm not mistaken, 25 of their 32 points were in the paint. That's not right. 24 or 26 of their points were in the paint in the first quarter. And then in the second half, it was kind of the same deal. Toronto ended up with 56 points in the paint in this game. And Jakob Poeltl, he ended up with 15 points. Most of that was in the second half. Minnesota started overplaying. They started overplaying. I thought Rudy was playing too close to the ball in pick and roll game. And they were able to throw bounce passes to Poeltl rolling to the rim. And the Wolves' low man was not recovering frequently or consistently enough to be able to contest Poeltl at the rim. So Poeltl ends up with 15 points, shoots 8 free throws in this game, and ends up having a really significant impact. Chris Boucher had 22 points off the bench in this game. He's just a really nice player. Another example of a guy that just plays hard, and he could be a stretch big. But for them to get a combined 27 on 21 shots from Poeltl and Boucher is awesome for them. And it's an indictment on the Timberwolves defense. Again, some of it's Rudy. I thought he had another poor game defending the paint. And some of it is, if the scheme is calling for Rudy to be at the level or to at least play higher in the drop, which is more what they were doing, then the low man's got to be ready to rotate in. And they got a backfill. They had a couple nice possessions. There was one where Naz did a good job. And then I think that allowed Rudy to recover, if I remember right. And there basically was the rotation was crisp, and it looked like last year's Wolves, where They were on a string. Guys were rotating to where they needed to be. But it didn't stick. It didn't happen with consistency. And that's one of the things Chris Finch has been talking about a lot in the media is the lack of consistency with this team. They do the right things for stretches, but it doesn't stick. It's not consistent enough. And that was certainly the case in this game. By the way, talk about playing hard. As long as I'm shouting guys out on the Raptors, Davion Mitchell, dude played 27 minutes, didn't make a shot from the field, but he had 8 assists and was a plus 20. And he was in the body of guys. And I talked the other day, actually, this is a big thing I talked about on Monday's show after the Julius-Randle buzzer beater over Phoenix on Sunday, is how good Julius is at mismatches and how he can dominate mismatches. And he's so much better than Cat at dominating mismatches. Well, I don't know that Davion Mitchell's a mismatch for him because Davion Mitchell's strong and he knows how to use leverage and use his body size and his strength to get up underneath the body of somebody like a Julius Randle. And he's pestered him into some bad turnovers, especially late in this game. I mean, Randle was good for stretches, but he ended up with 4 turnovers in this game, and 2 of them were in the fourth quarter, like in short order, like close to one another. Very disappointing. And again, credit to Davion Mitchell. All right. That's kind of what the game flow looked like. I already kind of did the play-by-play after, what happened after the Rudy-Randle blow up, but no offensive flow. It literally, like, as good as it was for stretches in the middle of this game, and at one point, Minnesota did build a little lead. I think they were up by as many as 7, and it kind of felt like they could put them away. But then it was Jaden McDaniels. Jaden McDaniels was good in this game, but it was like bad mid-range jumper from McDaniels. It was pull-up and transition contested from, DiVincenzo or Ant. Like, the shot selection for, again, consistency. It's just this one stretch or 2 stretches in the game that just kills them. They can't get out of their own way with some of this stuff. And if they just play solid, this is a team that you should still beat. Okay, let's close with individual studs and duds. A couple more quick thoughts here to get you into your weekend. That's how we'll close the show today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 per month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. All right, let's talk individual studs and duds. So this is pretty easy to kind of sort this out for this one. The Wolves only played 8 guys again. However, it was a different 8 guys. I didn't mention this off the top, but Mike Conley didn't play, sprained big toe. And DiVincenzo was questionable with back spasms, but played 30 minutes. The bench for Minnesota, 30 minutes from DiVincenzo, 22 from Reid. And he also, by the way, banged up his knee toward the end of the game. It looked more serious initially. We don't know yet. It looked maybe a hyperextension sort of a thing. Hopefully nothing structural, obviously. And then Dillingham played 10 minutes and would have played a little bit more, but he tweaked his knee toward the end of the third quarter, or excuse me, his ankle toward the end of the third quarter while committing a foul. He got his ankle caught and rolled it pretty badly. So he played only 10 minutes in this game and nobody else played. So we got 42 minutes from Jaden McDaniels, 38 from Randle, and 36 apiece from Gobert and Edwards. Alexander Walker only played 26 minutes in this game. DiVincenzo again played 30 off the bench. So studs for me. Jaden McDaniels was the best all-around player on the floor for Minnesota. And on the one hand, I know Chris Finch in the past has described Jaden McDaniels as a bellwether for the Timberwolves offense. When he's playing well, the offense is good. Well, on the flip side, if he's your best player in a given game, that means there's probably some other stuff not going right. And unfortunately, that's what we had here. Jaden was good defensively. He was awesome offensively, besides, he had, I think, just the one, maybe two shots that I didn't like. There was at least 1 3 kind of at a bad time. And then also that long 2 that he shot, I think, in the fourth quarter as well. It was just a miserable shot, like time and place for the shot. But like that happens, right? I mean, Ant takes a couple shots a game you don't like either. Of course, you'd rather them be taken by Ant than by Jaden. Jaden had 22 points on 8 of 15 shooting, 2 of 6 on threes, 4 of 4 at the line. Any game where Jaden shoots over 50% from the floor and gets to the line 4 times, that's a gold standard Jaden game. He had 7 rebounds too, by the way. 3rd on the team in rebounding, which also is very rare for him. 3 assists, 2 steals, only 1 turnover. Led the team in plus minus, which isn't saying a whole lot. It was only a +5. But hard to ask for a better Jaden McDaniels game. Really, seriously. Like, very good. The activity level, the rebounds and steals alone, and only 1 turnover tell you how good of a Jaden game it is. Or the fact, what I said earlier, he shot over 50%, got to the line 4 times. Like, that's a good Jaden game. A really good Jaden game. He had a nice dunk early in the game. Just missed a couple of blocks, too. I thought shots he altered and impacted with his presence. Very active. Like, if we could get this activity level from Jaden 82 nights a year, as close to it as we can, that would make a massive difference in this team's outlook. Another stud, man, I guess Ant. Like, Ant was good. He only had 5 points at halftime. He had a flurry in the third quarter. Overall, he was good in this game. It never really felt like an Ant game other than that short stretch. I mean, he came out and hit a 3 like right away, but then he was quiet in the first half, had the foul trouble. There were a couple of times he took the ball to the basket. I thought maybe he'd get a foul call, but he didn't. He finished with 26 points on 20 shots, 9 of 20. He was 5 of 9 on threes, which is great. 3 of 3 at the free throw line, only 3 free throw attempts on 20 shot attempts. And yet he was what? He was only 4 of 11 on 2-point attempts. There were a couple too many 2-point like mid-range shots from Ant in this game. I think he had a pull up from the elbow, which is generally okay, but if he's not in rhythm, that's not his shot. He only had 3 boards, a couple of turnovers to only 2 assists, couple steals, couple blocks. Like, it was a fine Ant game. I thought he was good. But because he didn't get a whole lot of other help, and I thought he was also part of the problem defensively with the perimeter defense, which continues to be shoddy. It was fine. He's still a stud for this game. Like, that's what we're going to go with. But not his best game. I really struggle with giving Julius Randle a stud, given the fourth quarter kind of meltdown and the turnovers. If you just look at the box score, it's hard not to, right? 23 points on 12 shots, got to the line 16 times, 9 rebounds, second on the team in rebounding, 3 assists, 2 steals. He did have 4 turnovers. Again, I mentioned them already. I'm not going to give him one. The turnovers in the fourth quarter were backbreaking. The mistake he made not giving the ball to Rudy with the mismatch was glaring. I'm not going to give him a stud in this game. I thought it was this was a pretty good example of some of the stuff that folks that watch Julius Randle in New York for a long period of time kind of warned Timberwolves fans about. He's a really good player. The box score can look good. The results can be good sometimes. But there's clunky moments. There's clunky fits. We worried about the fit between him and Ant. And in this game, it was the him and Rudy fit that felt clunky. Of course, this comes off the heel of his buzzer beater on Sunday. So I think there's a lot more to say about Julius moving forward. And trust me, I will revisit the Julius and Cat. We should do a Julius and Cat check-in in comparison. I'll be more than happy to pull some of the stuff I said from the time of the trade. I don't want to, and it certainly wouldn't be a victory lap because I want the Timberwolves to win basketball games. I want the Julius Randle thing to work out. But I also had some warnings when this trade happened. And some of those things for 15 games in, which is why I don't want to go skies falling yet. But some of the stuff I said is looking like it wasn't wrong. We'll say that. Okay. Duds. Naz Reid. I hate that Naz got hurt toward the end of the game. Hopefully he's fine, obviously. He had 2 points on 8 shots. 0 of 3 outside the arc. Only 4 rebounds in 22 minutes. A couple of turnovers. Committed 5 fouls in 22 minutes. Just not a good Naz Reid game. And they needed him. Shorthanded, no Mike Conley. not getting anything else from the bench offensively. They needed Reid to be the sixth man of the year, and he wasn't in this game. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is another one. Stepped into the starting lineup. He's a dud in this game. Had to start for Mike Conley. Only had 6 points on 6 shots. Knocked down a 3 early, but that was it. 4 boards, 2 steals. I just don't think it was a very effective Nickeil Alexander-Walker game, so he gets a dud as well. Dante didn't really play well either. He did have 3 steals and 4 assists, but he turned it over 3 times. 11 points on 12 shots. Not a great game for Dante. Rudy, I thought defensively was not good. Had some okay moments offensively. Had a couple of lobs he converted. I just thought this was a very pedestrian Rudy game overall. All right. I'll leave you with this. The sky's not falling. If the Wolves beat the Celtics on Sunday, the sentiment on Twitter will be a lot different, right? I'm not predicting they're going to. That's going to be very difficult, obviously. Played at Boston matinee at the Garden on Sunday. Like that's going to be a really tough game. I'll of course have on Monday we'll do the post-game pod. So we'll talk all about it on Monday. But just know, like, hey, it's an 82-game season. I did this multiple times for the end of last season where I said, hey, look, remember the year the Nuggets won the championship? They lost like 5 or 6 games in March. They lost to some bad teams. Like, this stuff happens. You'd rather it happen now than happen later. Could the Wolves just be a slightly better than 500 team? Yeah, it's possible, and that would be very disappointing. But that's what they are right now, and we're acting like they're 4-12. We're acting like they didn't change 25% of the rotation and their second best player on the eve of training camp. There's always going to be a learning curve. The question is, can Chris Finch manage it? Can Anthony Edwards step up? How do they manage it over the next few days? How do they manage the fallout of the Rudy-Randle stuff? It's all will all be very interesting to see how that plays out. All right. No game tonight, weirdly, and also no game tomorrow night, weirdly. So the next game is the Celtics on Sunday. I think we'll have the live postcast on Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube, and then the audio on this feed on Sunday. And I'll be back on Monday with the post-game pod. We'll talk all things Wolves Celtics from Sunday. Hopefully things turn around and everybody's a lot more positive by then. So big thank you for making this your first listen every single day. Of course, you can find Locked On Wolves wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch on YouTube as well as all of your favorite, listen on all your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on Locked On Sports Minnesota. That's an app you can get on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Reminder, you can also follow on X at Beecken and also at Locked On T-Wolves. Don't forget the T. And also one last reminder about the new Locked On Wolves Daily newsletter. You can find it at lockedondaily.com. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now. lockedondaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Wolves newsletter. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. A reminder that we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Reminder, the Locked On Network is your local experts on the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.